it's simple. The way that Nelson explained it is very simple. Capital is a responsibility, and it should be treated with great respect. I think oftentimes many of us do not respect capital the way it should be respected.
The golden rule, we've all heard it, do unto others as we would have them do unto us. But what we're talking about here is those who have the gold make the rules. And, you might kind of, as Nelson mentions right off the bat, we might chuckle about that. But I'll tell you, it's really, if you really delve into this, it is not a laughing matter.
It was a laughing matter the first time I heard it. I thought it was funny.
When you, I spent a little more time, I had a little more time to spend digging a little bit deeper on all of this. And so I was looking at different things. But, we go through the whole idea of, repeatedly over and over, we're talking about saving. And in my opinion, you would say that those who have the gold create the rules. If you don't have any savings or you don't have any gold, you are at the mercy of those that do.
Right. So there's a good and a bad to this golden rule, right? If you
Yes.
do have the gold, the way I like to look at it is if you have the gold, then you play the game of life by your set of rules, which gives you an advantage, right? The unfortunate side of that coin is if you don't have the gold, if you don't have the capital, if you don't have the money, you play the game of life by someone else's rules. And that game is hard to win.
Yeah, because, one reason is chances are they're not going to let you up. They kind of get you pinned down. And
why would they let you up? It just doesn't make sense, right? I mean, if they have the upper hand and they know they can profit for them, they could profit off of you for whatever it might be, even if it's just marginal.
Yeah,
we all care more about those that are closest to us than those that are not, typically. And we can often see that us winning the game of life can just be beneficial for our future generations, right? So it's not even necessarily selfish. It's doing what you feel is the right thing to do. So yeah, why give up that advantage once you have it? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it's really our responsibility to take control of this mechanism in our life and have a place to store our cash, I'll say /gold. You can use the analogy what they mean by gold, meaning you have capital.
Mm-hmm.
And without it, yeah, you're at the mercy of those that do. Again, I know I'm repeating, that's not good. But if you are saving some, at least you're on that road to getting out from under it. But if you're looking at the interest that you're going to gain on your savings if you put it in a bank account, that's not the right thing to be looking at. Really, just the fact that you have savings, you have some capital that you're accumulating, is a habit more than anything. If you can get into the habit, everything else can flow a lot easier, because you put yourself above everything else. You pay as you heard before, you pay yourself first by putting money into savings first, whatever that number might be for somebody. But
yeah, and wherever that savings is, and this is why Nelson was saying that this concept can be practiced with anything. You don't have to use whole life insurance to get ahead. Whatever you do in the financial world is compared with what everyone else is doing. Finances are so subjective. So yes, life insurance provides designed correctly with the right company, a good whole life policy will provide a good whole life contract. Will give you a better foundation and a better platform to go exercise your your will than most other vehicles would. But like you mentioned, savings is a habit, capitalizing is a habit, putting those resources into something that's going to create additional cash flow or create tailwinds, as um, Nelson put it. That's a skill that has to be developed, but you can't develop that skill until you have a starting point, until you have some capital.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. I mean, it might sound ridiculous, but even as little as if you want to save $10 a week, if you haven't been saving anything, just to start, it's like a push up. Start by doing one, however minimal it might be. It's all about the habit, so that you can eventually get out from underneath being in need of somebody else providing the banking function in your life on any level,
Mm-hmm.
however you want to start, because they really don't want you to be free. They don't want you to think free. They don't want you to act free. Um, but our founding fathers, that's what it was about for them. I mean, they didn't really want to secede from their homeland. They wanted to be a part of it, but the king had other plans for them. The king saw that they had some gold that they were harvesting, and he wanted it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
We'll go back
like,
even further than the founding fathers. Go back to the creation of man. When God created man, He created man in His own image, and He created them to be free, right? To have dominion over the earth, over all moving things other than men.
hmm,
And we can't do that if our wrists are tied, if we're in shackles. We just can't. So that's why I love talking to people about this infinite banking stuff, is because it's really a very practical way to get out from that, and to go exercise some freedom. And really that's it's good exercise. It's exercise in your mind, but it's also it's a good exercise for I mean, it's good to exercise that for your future generations. Like it's good all around, and everyone
yeah,
benefits from it. That's the I guess the beauty of capitalism is when you have free men contracting freely with each other to provide one another a service or a benefit. You get way more profitability, way more wealth, if you will, as a result of all of that. Like everybody wins. It's not even it's not to the demise of everything, as opposed to relying on the government or relying on other entities to provide everything for you because you need it. um I don't know, it just doesn't create that same culture of wealth. When I say wealth, I mean it's obviously more than finances.
right, yes, um, yeah. you know, in Nelson's Warehouse of Wealth, that last chapter, he talks about
Mm.
um, them walking around in the desert. Isn't that what the story's about?
Yeah, out of Egypt into Babylon or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that it can be difficult, because it's difficult for me to relate to that time frame. Like thousands of years ago, human nature is still pretty much the same, and and to sense that we're connected to that 3,000 years ago is difficult. So I'll just bring it a little closer, in that in the 16 1700s, that's a little bit easier to relate to, because these people were living right here. It's not like they were on the other side of the world. And 3,000 years ago, these people are our great 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 grandparents. That's who they are, and they lived through pulling away from their motherland, which they loved, but they didn't love what they were doing to them. They were trying to put their thumb down on them, and they said no. And as everyone knows, America became a great country. Everybody wanted to come here. So what would the founding fathers say to us now if they knew the
Mm.
state of affairs?
Oh man.
Uh,
Well, I love the way that he put that. You know, Jackson Pemberton put it in his 1976 little passage there called "A New Message on the Constitution." He goes through it for quite a while. Don't have time to read it on this podcast episode, but there are a few things that he does say that are really interesting, and one of them is that our success has brought the security which put you to sleep. And he's speaking from the perspective of the founding fathers. The success of the founding fathers has brought America the success that has put us to sleep.
right.
I've
Yeah.
experienced that so many times in my own life. I feel like every time I experience success or big leaps forward, I become complacent in some way. It might not be that particular way, but or that particular area, but a lot of times
Right. Yeah.
I struggle to maintain the same level of discipline that I had when everything was just in the tubes, you know?
Right. Yeah. When you were fighting to come back, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. Yeah. So Pemberton wrote this paper and never knew that it was in the book in Becoming Your Own Banker. He never knew that until
Oh,
last month.
oh, are you serious?
I'm serious. Um, if you go to his website, you look up Jackson Pemberton and you go to his website, the latest blog that he's put up there is about becoming your own banker
Oh, that's great.
because he just discovered that Nelson had quoted him, used his words. And the reason I know this, the only reason I know this, is because my brother was the one that actually contacted him. He they've had a number of conversations, they've done a podcast, but my brother was curious. My brother lives in New Hampshire and he's also an IBC practitioner. And he was curious who Jackson was. And he looked him up and he says, "Oh, geez, this guy's still alive. He's 88 years old." And now he's talking to him. Anyway,
Mm.
we're gonna provide the link to the paper that Nelson is mentioning, and it's Jackson speaking like he's one of the founding fathers to future generations, to us. He's speaking to us, and it's extremely powerful. And what the little bit I read, because it's quite a paper, the little bit I read makes you feel closer to our founding fathers and their ideas and what they wanted for us: to be free, to trade between each other, on a personal level. Banks were there to help, but they weren't running the show. They were just, yeah. So that just happened.
That's crazy.
And so this guy, Jackson, he was so taken by the whole concept of becoming your own banker. Now, he's an Austrian. If you go to his website, you'll see tons of information about freedom and money and banking and all this stuff. And he never knew about the whole life possibilities. And so he went out last month and became a life insurance agent,
Oh,
got his
wow.
license because he wants to be able to help people. And it's like, oh, what's that? Aha, whatever. It's like a light went off, all kinds of stuff. Anyway, that's really awesome. And so we'll have a link to that paper.
That's great.
He was he was he was intimately connected to the Foundation of Economic Education in
Oh,
Leonard Reed.
so did he
So
know? Did he know of Nelson Nash before?
he didn't. I don't think that they ever crossed paths.
Wow, that's crazy.
but they were both friends of Leonard Reed.
Yeah,
That's
right.
odd that, I could be mistaken. Maybe we'll dig a little bit more, but he has a place. He has a place down in Kansas City. That's where he lives. He and his wife, and so I think there's a good possibility my brother is going to fly here to Iowa, and we're going to drive down and hang out with this guy for a couple of days
That's awesome.
with Jackson. And do some recording and discussions and whatnot.
Yeah, that's great.
So the
It's
the
amazing
the
to
whole
hear when people who have the ideals that are so, they're just the Austrian ideals of freedom. When they come across becoming your own banker, they get very
yeah
excited
yeah
because it's
he's
practical.
right. It's it's about having the gold so you have your freedom, having capital so you have your freedom, and um and Nelson being a Christian and talking about it, that our creator wanted us to be free, and we're just falling asleep, you know as you mentioned.
Yeah.
um
Well, so let's go back to a practical application of what all this means with the golden rule. Um, the golden rule, basically stated again, is those who have the gold make the rules. And Nelson provided a great example of the Japanese wanting to
mm,
work with the Mexicans. Japanese provided the capital, the Mexicans provided the labor, um, and they were going to build a Panasonic factory there. Well, all that turned around, but or went south because of what the Mexicans were requiring when they really didn't have a leg to stand on because they didn't have any money. Um, I like how Nelson explains the Japanese strategy is you put money into a business for 5 years and you don't plan on taking any profits for 5 years. And then once you start making profits, for the next 5 years, you plow those profits back into the business. I mean, that's just a recipe for success. It's just very few people have the discipline to make that happen. One of
mm,
the things I like about infinite banking is that's the philosophy. You don't get into infinite banking believing that you're going to be profitable in year one. You know that it's going to take a little bit longer. It doesn't take 30 years, but
right.
it's not in 1 year, right? A lot of people start seeing some of that positive growth within 5 years, but some people feel like because of the way that they've been educated or brainwashed by our current society that you should be making a profit faster than 5 years.
Right. Yeah.
Traditionally, it's just not not something that would be expected. So I like how Nelson explained all of that.
Yeah.
One
Yeah. We
example, I guess, that I have that I've been thinking a bit about is even just on a consumeristic side is we all need a vehicle to drive to get around in our culture nowadays, pretty much. Um, so let's just say you want to buy a vehicle and it's $20,000. Um, you either have the $20,000 and you get to control that the terms of that agreement in that sale, or you have to go get a loan for $20,000, and you're subject to the market rates, you're subject to the banking rates, you're subject to their repayment terms, all of that kind of stuff. What do you think is going to be better, you controlling the environment in which you're purchasing a car, or having a third party controlling the environment in which you're purchasing a car from another party?
mm,
It's
yeah.
just pretty simple.
Yeah. It is. Yeah. The example you've used, if for some reason you lost your job and weren't able to make the payments, um, where would you want to have that loan with? Where would you want to be taking taking that loan from? But if so, the answer would be that you'd want to take it from the policy, so that you would be in control, and losing your job wouldn't be catastrophic, as it could be the other way around.
Right.
So, um, yeah, good example. Good example.
Yeah, and once we start relying on other people for things, let's just say we start relying on banks for their capital to allow us to drive the vehicles that we want to drive, it becomes very difficult to get out of that mindset. The chapter from Egypt into Babylon, Nelson was talking about how the mindset of getting out of slavery took so long for the Egyptians. It took them 40 years, the Egyptians, for the
Mm-hmm.
Israelites, sorry. It took them 40 years of wandering around in the desert to lose the mindset of being a slave. If they went into the promised land with the mindset that slaves eh, have, they wouldn't care for that place like it should be cared for. You go to any culture, any community, I should say, within America, um, that is heavily reliant upon the government, and it's just it looks like a dump. It's disgusting. There's no pride in the environment. There's no pride in the community. Looks like there's very little self-worth. And I really like how Nelson brought that. He extrapolated that from the Bible, that yeah, there is a season. Once you are used to relying on somebody else to provide your way of living, or to
Mm.
care for your way of living, there is a season that you have to go through in order to break that. I was talking with an entrepreneur friend of mine, and he was saying, you know, how difficult this first several years of business was for him. And he quoted what I heard so many people quote is, if you want to learn who you are, go into business for yourself. I've had to do that for myself as well. I mean, it's been 5 years of doing infinite banking, and it's not been easy, but I can look back and see how all of that time and all of the trials have been really just trimming off the icky mindsets that come with having somebody else provide all of the things that you need to to survive all of it. And you just think, well, this is stability, this is great. And I'm not saying it's bad. All I'm saying is, if you want to go exercise your own freedom and have total control of your own life, you got to have that stuff trimmed out, and it takes a bit of time.
Yeah, yeah. Building character.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a good way of putting it.
building character is like you're a big piece of stone, and you're constantly chiseling away at it before it comes forth, and you're always tweaking it, and learning. And you learn through pain. Sometimes things don't go quite so well, and it's good to reflect and learn from these episodes. So yeah, yeah. Um, the I want to go back to just saying that the Constitution, the Charter, we call it the Charter, we call it the Constitution. What they gave us is something that no one else in the world has ever experienced,
Mm-hmm.
and for us to squander that and put ourselves at risk in our generations that will come, also because we have fallen asleep, um, is to I mean, resistance to the things that are not the way. If something feels wrong and you look around and you figure out what's going on, is it the banking function in this world? And Nelson would say yes, definitely it's the central banks that have caused this debacle, that we are uh, debtors. Everyone is in debt, and we've lost that sense of saving and
Mm-hmm.
creating our own little pool of gold, so to speak. And quite literally, you could literally have gold and a life insurance policy. Um, one could beget the other if that's something that you want to do. I mean, it is infinite.
Yeah.
So,
Yep. I also appreciate the fact that capital must be respected. Money has to be
mm,
respected. There's a and he says that after talking about the Japanese strategy when they pulled out of Mexico because Mexico wanted to own 51% of the Panasonic business. He was saying capital is a responsibility and it must be treated with great respect. If not, then all parties involved will lose. And it's really easy to want more than we maybe deserve. Like if we go into our relationship with somebody, they have a bunch of capital, we can see they have excess and we don't have any capital. If I'm going into a partnership with that person, I could look at it and say, "Hey man, just give me a bunch of money so I can take care of my own needs right now and while we're getting this whole thing launched." Well, maybe that would fit the situation, maybe, but also if you have no capital, maybe it's because you don't have the character to handle that capital, right? And so
mm,
if the other partner was to give you capital rather than plowing it into the business, that might be the wrong course of action, right? Because as soon as someone who's undeserving of capital takes it and squanders it, that capital's gone, right? And
right.
I just it's simple. The way that Nelson mentioned it or explained it is very simple. Capital is a responsibility and it should be treated with great respect. I think oftentimes many of us do not respect capital the way it should be respected.
Yeah. Yeah. And just a little further down from that, Kyle, he says, so many of life's problems would disappear if this understanding was generally accepted and practiced widely among the population. And that was one of his goals, was to get a certain segment of the population practicing this, and and consequently it would grow to a level that the rest of the world would just accept it, um, as the best place to store cash,
Mm-hmm.
um, and capital. So, yeah. So,
Well, that was it for me on this section. I mentioned last time we talked that the Parkinson's law was the most. That's the law that most frequents my mind thinking about becoming a banker and looking around in the day to day stuff. The golden rule is very close second. This one
mm,
comes to mind often, and maybe it's because I have gone through that season where I didn't have the gold, and I've just seen how not having it has put me into a position um, of being subject to the will of others, and that's just not. It's just not the way I want to live. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like the I am living up to the potential that I was created for, right?
yeah, yeah.
So
And our creator wanted us to live a peaceful life, as Nelson puts it. Um, that they wanted us to be free enough to care and love and take care of one another.
Thank you for joining us on the Sound Banking Podcast. If you're listening on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe and click on the notification bell. Otherwise, join us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify for more content.